Hello. Okay, so I think we can start now, and then, of course, people will be free to join us throughout the discussion. So I have the honor of moderating this very interesting panel about the trends in renewable energy supply and, of course, the challenges. Maybe I sit over here in order not to be too far away from everybody. And to be honest, I'm extremely happy to be the moderator of just this panel because we have a different set of speakers, but among them, Bruce Douglas, now at Eurelectric, who was, I think, one of the founding fathers of the resource platform in Brussels. And he has spent, I think, the last 20 years, probably even more, in the renewable sector, and now with Eurelectric working on other topics as well, among them e-mobility and 24/7 supply of renewables, which I'm sure he's going to tell us about. We have Joop, who is actually from Resource Platform, Impact Director, and I look forward to him telling us a bit more about what Resource does now and how the next couple of years are going to be. We have Stefan, who is from MET, big player in energy trading in Central and Eastern Europe, and one of the sponsors of today's conference. And we have Ivan from ACT, who is going to tell us about guarantees of origin and what we can do with those to unlock even more investments in renewables. But there are also two people which will join us online. Mihai Balan from the Romanian Photovoltaic Industry Association, and Jochen Hauff, who is Vice President of SolarPower Europe, and also working with BayWa RE, one of the big European developers of utility-scale solar and wind projects, and also one of the pioneers of corporate PPAs in Europe. So, Jochen, because I have I know you have a hard stop. I would like us to start with you, and please say a couple of words about yourself and your position in SolarPower Europe, and I think you have a couple of slides to show us. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Nikola. Thank you for the invite and the opportunity to speak to all of you. Very sorry I can't be there in person. It was my firm plan. And then things turned out differently, as so many things these days. Yes, I'm representing SolarPower Europe today. So was asked by Bulgaria to APSTE, also her regards and greetings to this important conference. I'm a vice president there since 2016. I think I'm by now the longest serving one, despite my very young age. I have been part of SolarPower Europe also when Bruce was still active there, and I think we both played ball together to also help the resource platform and these things come about. So that was, I think, an important development, and certainly Bruce's great contribution made it possible. For us as BayWa, that was always an important topic because we believe also in the market-based approach to renewables. We wanted to move away from being only dependent on subsidy schemes and so on. And so the resource platform and this bringing together of renewable development and industrial consumption, but also municipal consumption, other consumptions was vital. Yeah, I was asked to give a few introductory remarks also from on behalf of SolarPower Europe. Happy to share this. I will do it with a few slides. I very much promise to keep it brief because I'm aware that you have a full agenda and are a bit behind. So I will go through this quickly. Hopefully it helps a bit to spark a discussion, and then happy also to stay on and participate as long as I can. Do you see this okay? Is it projected? Yes, great. Then I only need to manage to go on. So solar power on the rise. We have a great growth story globally that we can be, I think, proud of and also glad about. And the good thing is that Europe, after a few years of stagnating, having been an early pioneer, has now resumed its position as one of the growing markets, while other markets have grown even faster, which is fine. But I think dynamics are back in Europe, and there certainly is still a lot more potential. And now recently accepted or adopted, or better say proposed package by the European Commission here to repower EU will contribute to that growth in Europe even more so. So we see that now we have ambitious targets, which, you know, they are ambitious compared to what used to be the targets. They are not that ambitious compared to what SolarPower Europe here in its global market outlook has projected as the accelerated or the top line scenario. But still, we have to give credit to our policymakers. They have understood now that solar has an absolute vital role to play in the energy supply for Europe, and that hasn't always been the case, as many of you are fully aware. And I think by now we can say that has arrived, and also SolarPower Europe was successful in bringing about and inputting a lot of these scenarios, and also then the underlying assumptions and demands into this process. It also means it's a challenge. Yeah, when what I showed on the previous slide, there was a 30 gigawatt roughly installation last year. Now an installation rate of about here, depending by what year you look at it, about 60 or even 70 per year would be needed. So this means a doubling of the current speed. Yeah, and this is a challenge. So it's clear that is probably no longer the policy or the target setting that will be our core problem here, but it will be the question: are we as a sector prepared to deliver this? Can we do this? Yeah. Luckily, it's broad-based. Yeah, we're not only looking at large-scale utility ramp up. We also see, and the Commission has sees this as well and sees great potential there. Obviously, the rooftops, also more maybe innovative, newer applications, agri PV, floating PV, building integrated PV. All of this is part of the solar story. So it takes a bit the pressure away of any single segment to deliver it all. But it's clear solar has one of the great advantages is clearly it is broad-based. There are a multitude of avenues, a multitude of also sectors and branches of the economy that can contribute to this growth. So I think that's a great attribute, and it's also reflected in the Repower Europe package that a broad-based approach is needed so that this can be brought about. But it's also here, the fourth point I want to just highlight that is also seen that the supply chain, and will certainly already that was mentioned earlier on panels before, is an issue, and the topic of production and dependency on a purely or predominantly Asian importing strategy is a problem, and we need to address this. And for that, an industry alliance and an industry strategy to aim at rebuilding also solar manufacturing Europe is an essential part of the overall approach, and also of SolarPower Europe's policy priorities. With regard to PPAs, the package doesn't offer much in terms of concrete things. It's more, it gives guidance how to facilitate PPAs, and we think, and it's clear, and also we as BayWa think that PPAs play a vital role for said reasons of being a link to the energy markets and a link to the consumers and industrial consumers of energy. So they have been on the rise too. This is the picture, others on the panel can comment in more detail on these numbers from where we took them here from SolarPower Europe. The growth in PPAs and corporate PPAs is shown here has been significant, and solar, as you see, has now in the last couple of years gained an increasing share. For obvious reasons, the LCOE, the cost has come down to a level that it's obviously unavoidable and very attractive to include solar PPAs, and also we as a company, BayWa, have managed to build subsidy-free PPA plants 2018 in Spain, 2019 in Germany, and 2021, I believe, it came online in Poland. To name a few examples of what are parts of these yellow bars here. If you look at them on a country breakdown, it's also again broad-based, yeah. But clearly, Southeastern Europe is still missing here. So that is also one of our motivations, SolarPower Europe, and why we welcome this event here. We hope that it plays a role and helps to promote the PPA and especially also the solar PPA market in this region, because there are difficulties, there are barriers. I won't go into all of these bullets, don't you worry, moderator, Nikola. But clearly, and this has been mentioned in some of the panels before, the regulatory uncertainty, the question, well, are all the licenses in place? The fact that regulators are unexperienced and don't know how to deal with these new animals that are outside the defined subsidy schemes. Yeah, we had the same problems in Germany, that local administrators wouldn't know how to even permit this because it didn't follow the feed-in tariff or auction system rules. Yeah, it's somebody who says he doesn't need all that. How do we deal with him or her, right? So that's one aspect. Then there is obviously also now with the supply chain market challenges, an additional level of complexity, but also the topic of grid and the volatility of pricing and in electricity markets, which add additional difficulties on how to arrive at the price. I think there was a discussion where people on the last panel tried to cut a deal right there on stage, and the problem is where to lock in, yeah, and what is now the price level if you are experiencing an up and down. This used to be a bit more stable and a little bit more, at least we felt it's more predictable, and now we have to deal with that volatility. Yeah. So at the same time, these are the opportunities as well. We can, with PPAs, obviously provide some certainty, not only low prices or relatively low prices, but also certain prices for a long time. We have some experienced actors now also who manage to finance these sort of transactions, but it still takes a lot of more also experience built up on the side of the banks, on the side of the regulators, on the side of grid operators to gain trust and to see, okay, this actually works and this is a model that brings us all forward. I want to close just with the one core problem that I see personally, but also SolarPower Europe takes very seriously, and that is the PV supply chain. Yeah, and it's not only the question, can we get enough stuff, enough material to build all this growth, but it's also the question, can we have the transparency we need to make sure that these merchandise, these materials are produced in sustainable fashion, including, of course, international labor standards and so on. Yeah, and we know it's a difficult topic, and we need to work with our partners here on increasing the transparency, of making sure that we get assurances and can be certain that this is reflecting our needs and is reflecting our standards going forward, and is clearly based on a sustainable relationship. At the same time, we will need to build out a European manufacturer, right? We cannot be as dependent as we are currently. We don't think that we will be independent, and I think everybody who proposes that we could be independent of imports here, yeah, that would be a wrong concept, but we need to absolutely strongly increase and boost the manufacturing capacities along the value chain. Yeah, so this doesn't only start at cells and modules, this goes back into silicon, but also crucially into wafering production as well, so that we can get a significant part also sourced in Europe. And I think that will be a crucial element that is decided in the next 1, 2, 3 years, and these investments are necessary in order to make a sustainable contribution as shown before. With that, I want to end it and not take more of your time in terms of slides. Happy to answer any questions and participate in the debate.
Jochen, thank you very much. Very interesting. You covered the broad range of topics, and I think this helps a lot to frame the discussion. So, starting from here, I would like to give the floor to Joop and to ask you for something. I actually experience issues sometimes to quickly and concisely explain what the resource platform actually is, because it's not so familiar in this region. Obviously, all of us know that this is probably the biggest event I can imagine in the power sector in Europe. At least I haven't seen many events with 1,000 people in, or 900 people in Brussels or Amsterdam. And it's great for networking. It's the place where you can meet developers and big energy consumers at the same time. So it was like a revelation a couple of years ago. I think it was 2017 when the first event took place. But Joop, what is happening now? So how do we explain what the resource platform is and what it does and who is there?
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks for the invitation, and it's great to be here in Bulgaria for another resource hub, because the resource is much more than, let's say, a platform to bring together suppliers and buyers of renewable energy, but it's also a network of local hubs, of which Southeast Bulgaria, of which the hub for Southeastern Europe is just one, because also we have one in Poland and one in Ireland and elsewhere. And we really want to stimulate the network of bringing together those buyers suppliers, to really focus on the possibilities and the potential that there is for corporate sourcing of mainly wind and solar in Europe. And as you have seen in the slide that Jochen showed, it's an exponential market. So 10 years ago, basically no one really believed in PPAs, and right now it covers up to 15 or 20% of additional capacity of new projects for renewables. So what we do as a platform is bring together those suppliers and buyers in the event that we have in Amsterdam on 6 and 7 October, where buyers can actually come for free, and indeed it is a major networking event with B2B matchmaking for buyers and suppliers, but also you can hear a lot about the PPA market as such. There are sessions on hydrogen, on cities, on other topics that are relevant for us. And the other thing that we do is really focusing on the policy environment. So we have a lot of position papers, not just for the EU bubble, so the discussion that happened in Brussels around let's say the market conditions, to shape them in such a way that power purchase agreements can be signed more easily. For instance, and it can happen very fast, it can change very fast. For instance, in Spain, 4 or 5 years ago, there were no PPAs being signed, just as is the case in Bulgaria right now, and it's currently the biggest PPA market in Europe. So this is really something that can be exponential, and it is very important because for wind and for solar, if you want to achieve the 2030 target and also gain energy independence from Russia, you really need to double the deployment of wind and of solar. And for that, PPAs are really a key enabling factor. So the resource platform, which is founded by Wind Europe, SolarPower Europe, RE100, and the World Business Council for Sustainable Development in 2017, really wants to stimulate, let's say, the PPA environment, so that not just in 11 member states in the EU, PPAs are signed in the future, but all across Europe. So that's great, why we also have a hub in Bulgaria, so it can really then kick off, let's say, the PPA market in this region.
Great, thank you very much. I think it's a good entry into what resource is and what it does. For me, 2017, I remember I was invited by Bruce and by Daniel Dank, who is here in the room. He was also very involved. Of course, Jochen and the board of SolarPower Europe, as well as Wind Europe too. But Bruce, I remember we were discussing back then how this came to exist. So what was the rationale behind the resource platform? Because I think you were involved from day one. And what is happening now? So fast forward 5 years from where we were back in 2017, and also with the new hat you're wearing, being at Eurelectric. What are the new frontiers in front of corporate sourcing, corporate renewable sourcing?
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for inviting me, Nikola. Super proud to be here. And you mentioned many of the supporters and friends that helped build the resource platform. I mean, back in 2017, as you saw, there was 1 gigawatt. There's now 7 gigawatt per year of PPAs being signed across Europe. But back then, there was just a handful of multinationals who were present in the market. And we launched it. I've got not a lot to add to what Joop said about the reason for having the resource platform. But at that stage, it was clear we needed to raise awareness, to build the market, and make it as simple as possible. Nowadays, in RE100, I believe it's almost 400 companies who have committed to 100% renewable energy, but it's still an exclusive club. It's still a complicated process, and you know, of those 400, they're all multinationals, and as you've seen, in certain regions, it's still difficult to sign PPAs. Now, there are other ways to, of course, source renewables, rooftop solar, direct wire, and so on. But the PPAs at the time, we thought, let's simplify it. We created the EFET standardized contract.
Which, sorry to interrupt, we're going to present tomorrow. I think EFET is going to have a panel only dedicated to that, and it's going to be focused on Bulgaria, and I hope also we're going to hear about the Romanian translation.
Perfect.
Closing brackets.
Perfect. And that's exactly what this is about. It's not about, you know, a centralized Brussels-based lobby organization. It's about action in the regions. It's about translating these documents, the toolkits, the academy, and the standardized contract. Now, that isn't enough. 100% renewables is not enough. So the RE100 criteria allows the members, those companies, to meet their commitments through a range of means. I think over 70% of those 400 companies aim to meet their 100% targets through green tariffs, unbundled GEOs, which, as you know, have limited or no effect on grid decarbonization. So we want to go a step further. You asked about the next steps. Well, corporate sourcing 2.0 is really about providing transparency and credibility for those companies and other companies. We call it 24/7 renewables, which is another step towards grid decarbonization. First of all, it connects the renewable energy production and consumption directly. Second of all, it provides that transparency and credibility for companies. And thirdly, it incentivizes new build renewables. Now, this is still very early stage. It's like PPAs were 10 years ago. But what it does is shine a light on the activities of the corporates in terms of their renewable procurement and carbon emission reductions. So we're working on that at the moment. We've launched a task force with the resource platform to investigate it. And although this is a long journey, we see it as inevitable in the end that everyone will have 24/7 renewables, or at least clean and renewable energy, carbon-free. It is a long journey, and we do not expect, you know, the corporates to immediately step towards 100% 24/7. What it requires is an enabling framework to allow the certificates to be granular, so the guarantees of origin to have a timestamp on them, and then that allows down to 15-minute matching. That's not in real time, obviously, it's after the effect, but you get the idea that by doing so, you really get to see where your power is coming from and the effect on your carbon emissions reduction. So it's a step in the right direction. We're going to see where that leads. In the meantime, whilst we're exploring it, of course, we get a lot of visibility and progress on flexibility, and specifically on storage. You need significant storage and digitalization to allow that to happen, which enables everyone to be lifted to the next level. So although there's only a few corporates doing it now, we imagine more and more will do it, and as we do so, it will help the existing market. One last comment is that, of course, it's not compulsory. This is an optional step. Some, like Google, are taking that step, but as with the PPAs, we foresee a period where many more corporates will be doing that, even down to the residential level.
That's great, and I think we have a representative of FlexiDAO, one of the companies involved in that project, in one of the afternoon sessions. which I hope we are not going to delay too much. So again, I want to apologize for that delays. That sounds very interesting, and to me, being now active in Bulgaria, Romania, also I know there are colleagues from Greece and Turkey in the room. You know, we have a regional market of 100 million, but still very early stage. So we are like the mountain climber who's sitting, you know, somewhere far away from the peak, looking at the top, what you're describing now, and still needing to do the first steps, you know.
Hopefully we're building the lift for you to make it easier.
Oh, that would be great. I think that's helpful, and also what EFET and everybody else from our international partners is doing is helping a lot. I think that...
Sportsman's like, I mean, you know, there needs to be some exercise. You need to go another level then.
Absolutely,
you know?
absolutely.
If the first approach is made easier, we expect greater innovations from you.
Absolutely. I think it's sometimes actually a benefit to be a late starter, because then you're able to jump over certain stages. Earlier today I discussed with, I think with the head of the TSO that we were lucky to skip gas in our power generation, mostly skip it. We have other issues though. Anyways, Stefan, you represent a big energy trader. So we're looking at 100 million people market in the region, if we include Turkey, of course. So what are the challenges? We are still far away from 24/7 renewables. So when do you see the first sizable PPAs coming? We heard from Severin Vertigo earlier. There's an RFP coming out in a couple of weeks. There were some corporate PPA signed in the region, Mytilineos, also Toki, a Bulgarian company, signed a PPA with a telecom, but it's really the very early days. So what are the challenges that you see as a big regional trader?
First of all, thanks a lot for the invite. And honestly speaking, from a trader's perspective, it's really, how to say, if you ask me, I would like to give PPA conditions for 10, 15, 20 years, and I would like to collateralize it properly and to could guarantee the price for the producers. The problem is that our markets are really small and not so well connected. That's why it's really hard to price the cannibalization, especially on this dynamic market at the moment. Probably 2-3 years ago, when the prices were flat, everything was pretty much good for forecasting, and we could expect a good back end of the curve. Now we don't know. Actually, we don't know. If we want to price something, yeah, I would be happy to give some quotation for 2, 3, 4 years until the market have some pricing. Afterwards, it's not priceable. That's the main issue. And we should separate the corporate PPAs on 2 steps. The first one is without batteries and with batteries. If we have storages, yes, of course. But there are a lot of risks, which I'm not so sure that all of the producers are ready for. We have supply, we have movings in starting periods of all this, and this should be all priced. And yeah, we are seeing now really high prices in next 1-2 years to the end of 2023, but afterwards, even on this market now, on these prices at the moment, you could check the power prices for last week in Belgium, for example.
So we have a little bit of a catch-22 situation, if I understand you correctly. We have volatile but still extremely high power prices. Right. So developers see good numbers in their Excel sheets.
Absolutely.
And then they come to you, and you, of course, have to, take the long-term risk.
Absolutely.
And you don't see necessarily the power price in the next, let's say, 10 years staying high, or at least you're not, or not you, but you know, traders in general are not in the position to bet on power prices staying high, and then not willing to take the risk, if I
Exactly.
understand correctly. We are not yet there.
Yeah, the problem is with the risk, especially on credit risk, on every, because longer PPAs are only for bigger companies, as you know. So the players, as Joop already said, it's an exclusive club. It's not for everybody. You can't price anything with this. So the problem is with, of course, with the cannibalization on this volatile market. On high prices, the cannibalization effect is higher.
May I just switch in and ask Jochen something which is
of course.
very much related to what you say, because Jochen, if you hear me, I remember BayWa was among the first developers to sign a big corporate PPA for a new built solar plant, sizable solar plant in Spain, probably 3 or 4 years ago. And I assume it was a very similar situation there. Perhaps even less so, because the power prices were not so extreme as they are now. They were, I think, futures were below 50 euros. So how did you manage to handle that? No trade secrets, just, you know, general picture.
Right. The one in Spain actually wasn't a corporate PPA. It was with an energy trader. Yeah. But obviously some of the uncertainties also governed that, and it was for both of us, for both sides, a first. Yeah, it was the biggest, so it went to both sides of the trading desk, basically up to the supervisory board. So it was a complex construct. So what Bruce mentioned, making it easier, is really an important factor. Yeah. But the one mechanism that we used was a floor price that was high enough to allow a bankability of the project, and then an index to the market price mechanism, so that a share of the overall payment would be indexed to the actual market price. So with an index, you basically you still have the uncertainty in it, but because of a minimum floor price, you know that you will be able to pay your loan back. Yeah, and it's the margin that is at risk, but not necessarily the existence and the viability of the project itself. And I think that is also a construct that large industrials and so on can embark on. But the problem remains, it has been mentioned, for small and medium enterprises, that is not the way they can procure electricity. So here, I think market intermediaries, electricity traders and so on, need to build portfolios that can take these risks and then pass on a more stabilized and de-risk product to smaller energy consumers. I think that's more realistic. And then, yeah.
No, that's. I think that's very interesting, because it shows the different avenues that the process is most probably going to go to. And a follow-up question to you and Stefan, how do you see the tendency now? There is clearly a trade-off between the duration of the PPAs and the amounts that you can fix, or not the amounts, but let's say the price per megawatt hour that you get. It's clearly a different risk-reward allocation if you go for a 4 or 5 year PPA or for a 10 to 15 year PPA. So given the high volatility, but also the very high power prices currently, is it maybe a better trade-off to go for a shorter duration and then leave a big merchant tail, or maybe still keep the longer duration as a developer, let's say, to you, Jochen, and then maybe Stefan, to you as a trader? So Jochen?
I mean, it really just depends on the individual risk profiles of the people involved, right? We are lucky enough, we can take either one position because we have an electricity trading capability, but we also have function as an IPP, or we are selling our project off to investors. So we have a broad range of options how we can structure any given project dependent on who is the counterpart, who is the, maybe even the investor. Right now in Germany, we did the first, I think, fully merchant, sorry, not fully merchant, but an unsubsidized floating plant, yeah, for an industrial consumer. So, and there it goes into their self-consumption, yeah. So that's another thing. It's a cement or minerals company, and that can just take it. So in such a case, you don't need to worry much about it. Yeah, they use this 100% against their own electricity consumption, whatever that plant produces. So it's hard to come up with one clear message here. It's clear we need a range of options, a whole toolkit to match the project situation. And that's then the challenge to regulators, policymakers, and so on. There is no one size fits all PPA set of regulation, and then everybody will be happy. It's not, the reality is more complex than that.
Thank you. So, Stefan, what do you think?
Yeah, exactly.
As a trader,
the reality is really complex, and from trading perspective, I would suggest that every customer we have which wants to build something is to take how much is possible as long enough. For example, 3 years on a fixed price, with the possibility, with the option for fixing afterwards. That's why that is the way to take part of the risk, and in such way, it would be easier for a trader to give, for example, 15 years PPA, because if you give fixed price for first 3-4 years, and afterwards, when the period is coming, according to the market, you could fix everything step by step. That's the way. Of course, the cannibalization risk is staying with the trader, but the producer would have some kind of good forecasting of the price and of the expectations. But unfortunately, that's the reality at the moment.
I think we have a financing panel tomorrow, and this is one of the topics I will be happy to hear from the point of view of financing institutions. Some of them are in the room today. Maybe if they want to raise a point during the discussion, that would be appreciated as well. Is Mihai Balan online? Mihai is the CEO of the Romanian Photovoltaic Industry Association.
Yes, Nikola, I'm here. I'm happy to see all of you. I'm happy to hear all of you, and I'm unfortunately unhappy that I cannot be there with you today. And apologies for this. I noticed that there's a great event happening right now in Sofia, and I would love to be there next time.
You're more than welcome. So Mihai, you heard the discussion so far. What is the situation in Romania? I think Romania, compared to Bulgaria, has probably a smoother legal administrative process now. Some reforms were done, so developers are perhaps moving ahead towards ready-to-build stage a bit quicker than Bulgaria. But starting from there, we heard what the regional traders are thinking. We heard previously what the industrial clients are working on, and how are things developing in Romania? So what can we expect there? Sorry, and just to finish the question, you also have the CFD mechanism coming in quickly. How does that affect the CPPA landscape?
Let's take them one by one, because it is indeed a complex situation developing in Romania after more than 7 years in which the market has been brought to a halt, complete halt. Things are now restarting, and one of the greatest and most encouraging things that led to this restart of the renewables development in Romania is the modification brought to the law of energy that finally allows PPAs to be signed again in Romania. This has been long awaited by the industry, long awaited by the consumers, and it's now finally happening. Romania is, or let's say that it will be a significant market for renewables. There's a big pipeline of projects, and we heard some encouraging news from Brussels with the REPowerEU package and the EU solar strategy, and we can think of a pipeline of around 15 gigawatts by 2030, and probably I would say that 60 to 65% of this would be solar. And even though half-heartedly, even the TSO acknowledges this, which is big news for Romania in their 10-year network development plan, they acknowledge that there will be 15 gigawatts of new renewables coming. They don't know how they will handle it, but at least they acknowledge it and have allocated 7 billion euros in funding for this. But ultimately, well, we have to acknowledge that we've been in this position before. We've been in a golden age of renewables, and then it came to a halt. So probably our goal today is to ensure that this new development happens in a healthy manner, and that we'll have a healthy market over the coming years. And it's not as much a national market as it is a regional market, as you are promoting today, as we were promoting 2 weeks ago in Bucharest, and as we will hear more and more in the following years or so. Most of the interest that's coming into the Romanian renewables market today is based on the National Recovery and Resilience Plan funding. The call for projects has started, and the first projects will be selected this summer. And then we'll have the Modernization Fund, which is the biggest source of public funding for Romania. There's 16 billion euros for the energy sector in the Modernization Fund. The first calls are supposed to start this autumn. Unfortunately, the CFD mechanism is not here yet. It is supposed to be here next year, but let's see how it unveils itself, and whether or not it will be a useful tool. We are all expecting it to be a useful tool, because the CFD, a double-sided CFD, would be probably the best instrument that countries might develop and implement today in this multiple crisis situation. Coming to the corporate PPAs market, well, as I said before, finally, since December 2021, we can finally sign corporate PPAs in Romania. And I would say that the market has not really taken off yet, and there's a lot of interest from everybody, but there's not a lot of knowledge. And it is ultimately our job to explain better how PPAs can represent a solution today for both developers and off-takers of renewable electricity. But it will be an uphill battle, because after 10 years in which there were no PPAs, things are just restarting. There's a lot of reliance on knowledge from other countries that already have a tradition in this. And we also have to see some commitment from the authorities to actually switch from a very concentrated day-ahead market to a long-term market, and PPAs are instrumental for this. What we know for now, well, there's quite an equal interest, for PPAs from traders, from the industry, from IT corporations. I wouldn't say that one of them edges the other at the moment, but discussions are ongoing. There's this whole vibe on how to quickly implement PPAs, because especially when it comes to developing renewables, particularly solar, everybody needs new capacities, new clean and cheap capacities today. And the sooner they come online, the better it is for everybody, given the prices on the electricity market. I will stop here and on the PPAs, because basically there's not much that we can say. We saw the first PPAs being signed in Romania. We hope that this will continue. What we also hope is that we won't see any missed IT corporation investment in Romania in the following years, because there's no framework for PPAs. Because we've seen this before. Let's hope that it doesn't happen again.
Thank you very much, Mihai. Very interesting. I think not completely unfamiliar to most people in the room. I also see Mr. Halil Demirdag, who is the chairman of the Turkish Solar Association and also active in Bulgaria, in Romania, in Turkey, obviously, as well. He was nodding every now and then, I think. And maybe we will hear from him and from others in the discussion. Just before we go there, I would like to ask Ivan from ACT, hearing all of this and obviously knowing how the margins look for developers, how can ACT or the companies like you that are trading guarantees of origin support the business case for new built renewables? And also, what is the difference between more mature markets like the ones in Central and Western Europe and the ones in Southeast Europe?
Thank you for the question. If I may switch to Bulgarian to share my thoughts, and then for the discussion part of the panel, maybe I can switch again in English for the panelists. Превключвам на български. На първо място искам да поздравя.
First of all, I'd like to congratulate the organizers of the event and thank you for the invitation. ACT is happy.
Като също така за нас е удоволствие и да предоставяме възобновяемата енергия за конференцията. Относно въпросът и темата, която обсъждаме днес, наблюдаваме
about this issue. We witness exponential interest in both corporate and industrial consumers. They want to go 100% renewable. One of the reasons is a trend which the large market players impose on their partners concerning carbon neutrality, those companies which are carbon neutral and can compensate their emissions are the preferred partners, and contracts are concluded with them as opposed to those who wouldn't do it. It's interesting to mention in this context that emissions which have to do with power consumption or scope 2 of the nuclear gases are emissions which can be compensated through consuming renewable energy, and the best way is origin certificates. So here we can explain what it is. It's an electronic document which certifies that a certain amount of energy has been generated from renewable sources, and they can be traded between producers, traders, and consumers. This is what our partners are. I see many of them in the room. Each country in Central, Western, and even Eastern Europe has its own registry of this type of certificates, and they make sure that there is no double counting. They track when the certificate was issued and the beneficiary. The investment factor in the network in Bulgaria is 0.47 CO2 equivalent to 1 megawatt hour. So 1 megawatt hour is equal to a certificate, and the certificate is valid for 12 months. We see increased interest from businesses in Eastern Europe, Southeastern Europe. However, the strong trend is in Central and Western Europe. And I would like to call upon companies which are interested in consuming renewable energy to get in contact with me during the breaks.
So I have many more questions to ask you guys, but I would like to actually give the floor to the audience. So if somebody has a comment or a question, please feel free to step in. I think there is one from Mr. Demiadak, so you need to switch it on at the bottom, I think.
Thank you for the kind invitation again, and very happy to be in Sofia. I can also speak in Bulgarian, but it's not very grammatical, so I prefer in English. Actually, we have seen, it's a funny story that you see the same movie again and again, and you do the same mistakes again and again. We know the beginning and end of the European solar business. As you may remember, there was an industry in Europe. And who killed it? European Union. Who wants to grow it again? European Union. And who will believe it in again? We are the public who will believe it again, possibly. What happened in feed-in tariffs? European Union decided to give very high feed-in tariffs and put the 2020 directive. All the countries give crazy feed-in tariffs. And then European Union said, oh, no more feed-in tariffs when the price could be 5 cents. And who is the stupid one here? And who is doing this for what? And to whom this is helping? This is the question. I mean, we have so many associations. Okay, unfortunately, Turkey is not allowed in the European, let's say, Union. But I think you have to be loud because public is paying for the 20, 30, 40, 50 cents feed-in tariffs. And now you are saying that I want to give 5 cents and balance the old high feed-in tariffs, and the European Union is saying, no, you cannot do it. Why? Because very big electric companies possibly should control this cake. I don't see very, very big energy companies here. Why they have to be here? They can manage it over there. The real PPAs, as my friend told you, let's say after 1 year, 1,000 megawatt is in Bulgaria more additional. What will be the market price?
The curve would be really interesting.
Yeah, and maybe zero, maybe minus.
Sorry to interrupt or to intervene. That was more or less a question I asked early in the morning to Mr. Tsachev from the TSO and to Mr. Georgiev from NEC, because clearly it's not only Bulgaria, we have the whole region. Turkey has massive new build, both wind and solar. Greece has already started with a gigawatt last year, probably up to 3 gigawatts this year. Romania and Bulgaria lagging behind a little bit, but the pipelines in the region are massive. So if we don't overcome this divide between southeast and, let's say, northwest markets in Europe, also in terms of connectivity partly, it's going to be a bit weird and a bit of a bumpy ride for developers and IPPs, I can imagine.
What we succeeded in Turkey, that there should be the governments, like in Romania, they decided a maximum price. I mean, they take tax 90% over a certain price, so it's a maximum price. I think that it's the job of a regulator is to regulate. You cannot leave a market free. What you mean free? You just leave it, and if it falls, it falls. This is not the job of a regulator. You pay electricity. You are an industrial producer, and you should have at least some logical, let's say, minimum and maximum, and we succeeded this in Turkey. Now, in the new auctions, we have a minimum and a maximum price. So there's a price that you go for an auction, and you get the auction, and then it says that whatever the price in the market cannot be lower than 3 cents and cannot be lower than 5 cents, higher than 5 cents. So that energy business is one of the most serious businesses in the world, but now it is becoming one of the most fluctuating and risky business in the world. After 1 year, if we have zero prices 3 months in Bulgaria, no bank will give 1 cent to any of us. And all those projects that we think that we will be able to do, we are not going to do anything. This curve that you going up will stay and wait for new consumption of electricity from electric cars. So you should put those two graphs together with electric car consumption of electricity, hydrogen consumption maybe from solar, and 3 of it together. We are dreaming. Believe me, we are dreaming. Just make let's make all together a future calculation how much the electricity will increase demand and how much we will be able to produce.
Thank you very much. Very interesting contribution, and this leads me to a follow-up question to Bruce and to Joop. So, Bruce, now with Eurelectric, we didn't mention, I presume that everybody knows what Eurelectric is, but maybe just mention a little bit to also frame your position. But how do we solve these kind of challenges? Because they're critical for investors, obviously, and for a reason, and also for traders, for corporate off-takers. They need to think about that risks as well, you know, be it Aurubis or Mytilineos, if they make a 15-year corporate PPA and then they are overpaying compared to markets in, let's say, 7-8 years, it's not a good deal probably. So what does Eurelectric think and do about that types of risks? And also when are e-mobility and renewables going to click together, like Khalil just mentioned? And Joop, also, is the resource working on covering these particular risks, or maybe the cannibalization risk is a big issue? Or is the focus now on, let's say, just making it more accessible and not going into the deep dive of you know, issues, but rather trying to spread it further, and maybe it's a battle you need to choose. Maybe not everything is doable at the same time. So Bruce?
Yeah, so first of all, Eurelectric, it's an association based in Brussels. We represent the power sector across the European Union and beyond. We have a Turkish member as well. In total, over 3,000 companies are members of Eurelectric. And I mean, my personal mission is to electrify everything, in brackets, that can be electrified. There's a little bit that can't be electrified, as you know, with clean and renewable energy. It just happens that's Eurelectric's mission as well. That's why I joined. But to your question, I mean, generically, this is what we lobby on a daily basis about, is having long-term stable frameworks for investor confidence. That is the key. If you have instability in frameworks, you don't get the investor confidence, you don't get the renewable build-out. And we see now, I completely agree with you, at the European Union level, but also at the member state level, with the RPIA, there's some good parts, accelerated permitting and so on, but there's some very questionable parts that we're deeply concerned about, which is market intervention. And you see at the member state level, Spain, for example, doing isolated caps on gas price, the tax, the windfall tax, and other, you know, panic emergency measures that again have a detrimental effect on investor confidence. But specifically on the corporate PPA sector, again, there's legislative areas which can be put in place that provide that confidence, and on the pricing. And quickly on the EVs, again, I follow your logic. EVs will grow. I mean, our forecast is 60 million EVs on the roads of the European Union, so that's not including Norway, you know, a first mover, if you like. Norway, by the way, this year, 90% of all new vehicles are full electric, 50% with managed charging. But with EVs, you know, the growth will be different in each country, of course, but they represent a fantastic opportunity for the development of renewables. They are a significant storage, mobile storage, and flexibility for the growth of renewables, and I completely agree they should be aligned in that way. So we're a strong advocate of electrification generally, and EVs will see that. What you need is managed charging. You need time of use tariffs so that the renewables are used when, you know, there's zero or negative pricing, midday in sunny regions and elsewhere for offshore wind. And that way, you completely exploit the opportunity for EVs. You'll see it in Norway, and it will cascade through Europe in the coming 5 years. As I say, 60 million cars by 2030, and that's about 30 million chargers, of which about 90% will be private chargers. And there you need to incentivize private households to take renewable energy for that charging through the mechanisms I mentioned.
Joop?
Yes, Nikola. So on the electricity market design, but also on feed-in rates, this is not really a topic that the research platform addresses. It's very technical. We really leave it to our founding partners, SolarPower Europe and Wind Europe, to go into that. But the only thing that I want to mention is that indeed the market interventions that we now see mainly in Spain and Portugal, but also discussions in Greece, can of course be detrimental to investors. So there could be, let's say, for instance, decline in PPAs being signed in Spain in the near future, because of the interventions that we've seen. I'm literally heard this back from investors, so it's more than just, let's say, a PR statement, and that is very worrying. When it comes to what resource does, indeed, what you said, the latter is more, we really focus more on, let's say, the general conditions to enable PPAs being signed, also in combination with, we're not a PPA platform, we're really trying to enable the market to grow, so also CFDs, a combination of CFDs and PPAs, it's all good for us. The main three, let's say, sectors that we want to focus on now is energy intensive, so it's aluminium producers, but also steel and others. SMEs, so what we now see, for instance, is an aggregation of SMEs that together step into a PPA. That I think we've seen this in France and in Italy last year. And then the final part, which is very interesting, is public procurement. So cities and government bodies who are going to source the energy. And this is not just about the buildings that they have for the electric vehicles, but also heating. So we have to electrify everything as process, and that includes also heating. So what you can think about in the near future is to have actually PPAs being signed for instance, for district heating or for large-scale heat pumps. So that's one other topic that we focus on.
That's very interesting, and I would suggest that all of these topics that we are now, just touching on, we elaborate in more detail in follow-up webinars. I hope we can organize that in the next couple of months. And I would like to ask if there's a final question, because we are really so late. Yes, there's someone there. Is there somebody else who wants to ask a question, maybe? Yep.
In your view, what is the best case how Europe and the government of each country can support renewable projects so that they are more bankable? At the moment, from the beginning of this year, there's probably not a single project which would get the project finance. All the banks are looking around and asking if this new project of gigawatts can be bankable or not. So the question is, what is your best case how the Union can support better bankability of the renewable projects? Thank you.
So maybe very quickly, everybody, with like one sentence. So my personal take on that would be easier permits and somehow control the downside risk or the cannibalization risk.
Yeah, completely agree with that. And, it goes beyond that. I mean, as we heard this morning, it's 18,000 megawatts of proposed renewable projects.
That's only Bulgaria. Romania has 30-ish.
Yeah, so, there's issues beyond what you mentioned. I mean, projects are bankable given the right, issues that could be corrected, permitting and the offtake situation. But, if there's no connections, and there's many discussions this morning about those issues, I think that's a bigger medium-term to long-term problem, is getting the grid infrastructure and the interconnectors and the legislation in place to allow connection of huge-scale renewables. You saw the figures, up to 750 gigawatts of solar across Europe. That will require connections, grid infrastructure, and digitalization.
Ivan?
Yeah, I would say legislation as well.
Yep.
Yeah, indeed, permitting. But one thing that and grid development, but one thing that is not mentioned is credit guarantees. So what we now see is that the European Investment Bank is looking into ways to actually make it easier for companies and organizations that don't have the Fortune 500 credit rating to step in. Spain and Norway have these credit guarantees in place, and the European Investment Bank is looking in with the European Commission to see how they can introduce more credit guarantee schemes in Europe. We'll come news about this later this year.
Stefan?
My opinion is that everything should go step by step together, interconnectors, financing, storages, and everything should go step by step. If we have 20 gigs projects, we should be ready to take it.
Thanks a lot. So I don't know if Jochen is still online. I think he had a hard stop.
I am still online, and I would have, yes, I I sent some chat messages out, but I'll have to drop out now. But picking up on what Bruce just said regarding the grid, that the one thing is really the physical ability of the grid to provide all these connections. And the next step, and that's what we already see in markets, is the question of the imbalancing cost and the cost that are then locked onto producers or to consumers, depending on the contract structure, regarding managing the imbalances in the grid and all these surcharge payments and so on, the balancing payments. Here, often, this is not foreseeable in any way. It is often not indexed. It remains as a risk in the contract. And here, energy traders, together with regulators, together with grid companies, need to find ways to, because uncertain or imbalances will increase with increased amounts of volatile renewables in the grid. We know that. You can model it, but the question is, how does then the tariff structures for and the balance payment structures in the national markets, and often that's very national, react. So this cannot be taken. I mean, this has to be part of the thing we look at, because that's a significant cost driver that we experience already, especially also in our attempts to structure PPAs in Southern and Eastern Europe.
Thank you, Jochen. Mihai, also one last word from you, maybe?
Yes, indeed, as everybody just said, storage is essential. Plus, on top of this, we need interconnection and connectivity, because in this age of energy transition, electricity should not have any borders, at least where it is possible. So there's a very big need for joint planning in order to achieve this. And there are also other barriers. There's the value chain that needs to be also developed jointly inside Europe and regionally, because we will probably face shortages in equipment very soon. We need to reshore the PV production to Romania, Bulgaria, and Europe in general. And last but not least, let's not forget about the workforce. I think this will be probably one of the biggest challenges in the following years, especially in our region, Nikola, and we need to work closely together to avoid having shortage on the workforce that can limit the development of the renewable sector.
Thank you very much, Mihai. I think it was very good last word for the panel. I would like to thank everybody, and let's bring this interesting discussion during the lunch break, which is